Hey everyone, welcome back to LaunchPod. Today we have a special request for you guys. If you like what you hear, if you liked an episode, we just ask that you simply pick up the phone and tell a friend. We'd greatly appreciate the support. In this episode, our CEO Joe Canavan sits down with two Next alumni to dive into how they're working together to build their company and integrate mental wellness into its core, all while maintaining their own mental health. A super important topic, so please enjoy.
Hey everyone, it's Joe Canavan. I'm the CEO of Next Canada. I'm here with Marie Chevrier and Shonezi Noor from Sampler, and we are going to talk about all the great and wonderful things that their company is doing, the impact they're having in the country, and the impact it's had on them. We're going to talk a little bit about companies in general, but more specifically today, we're so lucky to have the two leaders of Sampler. And I think maybe the way we start is just, where did this unbelievable business idea come from?
Yeah, so I'm Marie Chevrier. So I'm the founder of Sampler, started Sampler 6 years ago, actually. And it was after several years of thinking through the problem of product sampling. So started my career while I was in college, handing out free product samples on street corners, doing the rough job, being that brand ambassador. And right from that moment, I realized that product samples had a very, very important role in convincing consumers that a product is a must-have. I mean, I really recognized that that was an important moment in the brand's journey, yet that for most of these sampling programs, the consumer was grabbing the sample and walking away, and the brand was losing touch. So fast forward several years, I end up in digital marketing. I start being exposed to, ads, digital ads, all the ways that brands are spending money. And still, I'm skeptical. I'm thinking a lot about, they're spending a lot of money. The consumer is not actually getting that great of an experience. There's not much value from a consumer standpoint. And fast forward many other years later, I had the opportunity to end up working in a venture capital firm called Rocket Internet, where I learned everything I know about being an entrepreneur. Started a company as a founder called Drop Gifts, so that was my first business. There I learned about, how do we build a business, and that failed. That was my first failed startup. It wasn't my idea though, because the model was kind of like more you inherit the business model and you kind of build it. So anyways, learned a ton. It was my MBA, if you will, but knew that, I wanted to come back to Canada because that was in New York, and I did. And that time I did it based on my own experiences, which ended up being my insight on product sampling. So that's ultimately the long story short. The idea was kind of there early, but it took many, many different years of adding up different experiences to come to the insight of we should merge product sampling and technology. So that's...
Wow. What were the two or three things that you learned from failure?
Yeah. Oh my God. So many. But I think the biggest thing was actually oddly that I had everything I needed to succeed, and that unfortunately that was just not the right project, or it wasn't necessarily the right team. But I actually built so much confidence through that failure, actually, because at that point, I got to know myself so well through the ups and the downs. And this company wasn't necessarily set up for success. And as I said, it wasn't necessarily my idea from the beginning, but I learned so much about myself, just working at as a fast-paced startup. And it gave me the grit and the confidence to say, I can do this on my own. I can do this. And oddly, the failure taught me I was fully capable of doing it under other conditions.
Well, listen, great for you to learn more about yourself and be introspective, because sometimes people go through that process and they just say, you know what, this isn't meant to be, this isn't who I am. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe share with the folks who are listening, how did you know that you were meant to start a company, lead a company, grow a company, scale a company?
Yeah. I think I've never felt more alive than I did when I was for the first time an entrepreneur. And so, I like many of us, have had a lot of like 9-to-5 jobs, or 9-to-5 jobs for which like I still incredibly was passionate. Like you can't knock the passion out of me, but there was something about becoming an entrepreneur and having a business, like having that impact on a business, and being able to guide the direction, and like being able, like needing to like work so hard every day to just get to the next step. And yeah, I got the bug. I got the bug.
And you're up against some in-market players. You're up against people across Canada. You're up against people across North America, around the globe. So this isn't a no-brainer. It's not like, okay, I've got an idea, let's go get it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is some pretty serious competition, and you were able to rise above that.
Yeah. Someone in an interview earlier, we were interviewing someone, and I think she gave us the best compliment I have ever had. She said, "Your team strikes me as one that punches above its own weight," and I think that's true.
Well, speaking of team, tell us a little bit about how you met Shonezi and what role she's played in the success of the organization.
Yeah, so being a sole founder, I have to say that the power of building a strong team around me is definitely been one of the reasons we've been able to punch above our own weight. And I have participated in the Next Founders program, so that would have been several years ago, and maybe it was 2 years ago, or 2018 summer, I was presenting at Startup Fest, and in comes, after my presentation, this like shining ray of light behind this stage that comes to me with her notebook. I'll always remember it. And there was Shonezi, and she came up to me and had some of the most thoughtful questions I had ever heard, just incredibly well-spoken girl. And she immediately leaned on, the fact that we'd both been part of the Next Founders program. I think she was just completing it at the time. And anyways, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, I don't know who she is, but the way she presents herself and the way that she puts so much thought into, that first meeting, I said, I have to stay in touch with her. And so I'll let Shonezi take it from there on, kind of like how she ended up working at Sampler. But that was my first impression.
That summer, I was actually currently in the Next Founders program. So my startup was based in Montreal, but I was living part-time in Toronto to participate and really be immersed in the experience. The thing that struck me most about Next Founders versus other entrepreneurship circles I had been part of, particularly in Montreal, was the quality of the peer group. And when I first heard about the program, John French, who's the director of marketing at the time, he essentially sold me to apply to the program, showing me Next Founders information booklet, and Marie was on the cover. He's like, there are so many amazing founders here, so if you apply and if you participate, you're going to meet amazing peers. And that was the core thing I was looking for from the program. It's such a different feeling to be around people who are thinking globally, are really driven, work hard, and really want to make it past all of those, the international competition that you mentioned, right? And I was so excited because I saw that she was speaking at Startup Fest. I was attending, and I knew that I had to find a moment to at least say hello, because we had this program in common. But through her very enormous long reputation that precedes her, I knew a lot about what she was doing at Sampler. And I was actually at a really interesting place in my business where I was realizing more and more that my founder and I, we had strengths, we worked well together, but actually we wanted to build different businesses. And at that moment it was really hard to come to that realization, but as I was starting to realize it, it started to strike me when other teams were building towards the same thing, when we were building towards something, to two different types of businesses. And the things that interested me most were how technology was completely reshaping supply chains, how consumers were interacting with brands, with products, and that's a lot of what Sampler gets to do. So, when late in the program and towards the end of the summer, shortly after I met Marie, I actually got a concussion. That was sort of my body's way of telling me that you need to think about some of the way that you're spending your time right now, and maybe it's the opportunity to take a pause and reflect and see if this is still the right thing for you, or whether you should be maybe doing something different. And it so happened the week that I resigned from my company and my co-founder took over as CEO, Marie, out of the blue, sent me a message just to say, hey, how's it going? And it just feels like one of those serendipitous moments where, how would she have ever known that I was at this inflection point, and reached out and said hello out of the blue with nothing. She didn't have anything to talk about. She just reached out to say hello. And from there, we started to, keep in touch as I was exploring other opportunities, particularly in Toronto, because from that bug that I caught from Next Founders and then the peer group and the people here, I knew that I had found sort of the environment I wanted to be in. And the non-negotiable for me was I was going to be in Toronto by the end of the year, no matter what. And everything fell into place.
That's amazing. So it's also the energetic side of who you are. You're being introspective, you're putting something out there. And then when the sign shows up that maybe there is a pretty big opportunity, you were aware of it, you were awakened to it, and you're ready and willing to act on it.
And Marie definitely puts you at ease because she's somebody that she behaves in the way that she speaks, right? Her actions and her words are always aligned. And that's one of the first things that I sensed about her when we first met. And we had a very early, I'd say, kindergarten relationship. We didn't know each other that well. But then as we started to keep in touch and perhaps shape a way to work together, I realized that it really wouldn't have mattered to me what I would have done here at Sampler, especially at the beginning. I just wanted to continue to develop this relationship, and I wanted to have an impact on this amazing business, and I'll do whatever is needed to help support the business because I feel very passionate about what we're building here.
Wow. So you just jumped on board and said, okay, let's see how this goes.
And I think the thing that's one of Marie's strengths is that she sees where people could fit into the broader picture. So she talked about building a strong team. I've learned a lot about building strong teams from Marie in the short year and a bit that I've been here. And one of the things that I think she recognized as well is what maybe somebody would enjoy and what service they could have. Like, how could Sampler and the person's career align really well? And so, everything that she proposed to me, I didn't have to suggest that maybe I wouldn't enjoy it or I wouldn't be a good fit. I was like, you understand me so well, even though we've barely known each other, right?
Yeah. And the chief of staff role, which is not initially which came on as, but the chief of staff role is such an awesome opportunity for someone, for an entrepreneur to bring someone who is an entrepreneur as well, right?
Yeah.
So for me, we've really made it work, where I really do think she's like the yin to my yang.
Right.
I'm terrible at numbers. She is a pro at numbers. I'm really good at scheduling. That's we know her. So we and I mean, there's worse things to be bad at. But you always have to, as a CEO, always find complements to your weaknesses. And I think that, that's really what we found in ourselves. And I think chief of staff was a perfect first role to get into the company and see where her future would lie. So it's awesome.
That is awesome. So, and now you've built a culture that identifies with who each of you are, which sounds like very complementary teammates and, cohort. And you're building towards something pretty spectacular, and you've really grown aggressively. What were some of the things in your first 6 months building this company? What were some of the things that were really exciting and helped you know for sure that you were onto something really big? And what were some of the things that maybe caused you to question?
Yeah, I mean, in the last year, we've learned more about the business than in the first year. In the first 5 years, right? So what we found is that for the first little bit, we've really been building this business kind of throw it on top, just gross, without actually stopping to lay down the proper foundation for for that growth, right? So I think that's something that happens oftentimes with companies kind of at our stage, which is like Series A stage, like 30 people. You start hitting a moment where you can't just expect growth to continue if you don't stop and lay the right foundation. And so the last year, 2019, for us was really about thinking through what are the processes, who are the customers that we want to go after that are the best for our business? What are the processes that impact our business? How do we optimize every aspect of the business? And it was really, really great to do that with new fresh minds looking at the business. And Shonezi was a big part of that. So a lot of it was just operationalizing like every single department and laying the foundation in the last year again.
Interesting that you would go for a number of years and then hit that inflection point. Like, do you think it was, individual or person driven, moment in time, accumulated wisdom, a combination of all of those?
Yeah, I think it's like cumulative wisdom, years of I think it's a lot of a lot of factors, but we just couldn't expect all of the growth to continue at the rate that we were going if we didn't relay the foundation. But I think it's also market driven. So where the demand in our space is like really expanded in the last 2 years, finally hit that inflection point of people are paying attention, buyers want it now. So you got to rethink about, okay, well, we used to serve 20 customers. Now we serve 300 a year, right? So how do you make sure that you're ready to do that? So
one of the things that, having been lucky enough to start a bunch of companies, that I know once you hit that inflection point and you have this massive momentum and you have to scale, you're hiring, raising funds, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of 2 a.m, you're waking up in a bit of a cold sweat. Help me understand, how that has affected you, that growth, that acceleration, and all the pressure that goes with it.
For me, I'm super transparent about the fact that it's not a super easy journey. I just recently made a post on LinkedIn about a recent burnout that I went through. The problem with entrepreneurship is that it's so exhilarating. It is it's truly the best drug in the world, right? Because you have these amazing highs, as you mentioned, and unfortunately sometimes the lows are very low. So it's very easy for us to I think where for me it had been challenging is that I didn't really know at one point how to separate work. I enjoy everything. Sometimes I would rather watch my users click through our user experience on the screen recording app that we have than to watch Netflix. Right? It's that you love your business so much that you don't separate what is work and what is pleasure sometimes, and it can get very dangerous. So my biggest learning has been that even if you're just browsing through your emails at 10 p.m. or you're just looking at a competitor's website at 10 p.m., you have to consider that that's work, even if it's not actively work. And you have to be aware of that. So how much time are you leaving for yourself to not be doing work, even if it doesn't feel like work, was something I had to rebalance.
And so if you get to a point where you feel burnt out, is it going through a therapy session? Is it going and doing yoga, meditation?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of all the tools that I've used to manage through tough times like that.
Yeah.
Which ones were helpful to each of you?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're both big meditators. So meditation has been definitely big for me. Yeah, and also for me, scheduling my downtime and making sure that I just am aware of, that I don't work on Saturdays, for example. Like Saturdays are my sacred day. So meditation's been big, and just, scheduling my time off.
Yeah, I meditate a lot as well, and I'm really fortunate that my mom was a meditator when I was younger, so I learned when I was as young as 8 or 9, and kind of carried that through my life. But I use so Vipassana meditation is the technique that I use, and they have 10-day retreats. So you don't have your phone, you don't have access to anything. It forces you to really reset and cleanse very deeply. And I find that when I come back from that, your sponge is now empty to start to be a support to other people on the team who are going through stress, or to deal with the emotion of the day that might be really heightened or really low, depending on what's going on. And I definitely find that helpful. And I think it's really great to learn how to set those boundaries between your work time and your personal time, like Marie mentioned. So one of the things that I try to do is be really infrequent on my email over the weekend. Unless there's a very urgent need for a project, I'll try not to give into the temptation to sift through like 6 hours of data, because I like doing it, right? And it's when it's fun, it's very hard to recognize the signs. But some of the signs that I've recognized is, when I don't eat well, or when I don't exercise well or often, those are the symptoms of I'm getting close to that place where I'm not paying attention. And then you have to just reset and start to pay attention a little bit more.
So do you have team initiatives to help with that? I think going away in a retreat is a very personal experience. Is there something you do together or as a team to manage through the high pressure or high intensity times?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we instill is flexibility. I think that's like really important. So we allow people to manage their own schedules. You're expected to work 8 hours a day, but you can come in at 10 a.m. and leave at 6 p.m., or you can come in at 7 a.m. if you're a morning person. It's really up to you to have that flexible schedule. We tend to have really open conversations around like, hey, we have a busy time coming up over the next few weeks. It's very likely that we're going to need to, all be a little bit more, like a few extra hours in the office or stuff like that. But we expect that this will end in 2 weeks. And after that, let's make sure that we all take time to reset, right? So I think that's really important. And then work from home days, that we allow people to work from home at least 1 day a week. And then generally, like, I think just, being very open and being able to say, I'm tired today. And
we put a lot of conscious effort in making sure we try to offboard or onboard whoever needs to cover you during vacation time. And particularly because Slack is this addiction for so many companies, and like you're always on Slack and it's so accessible on your phone, even when you're supposed to be on vacation and not online, that we I swap people away from their Slack, and I'm like, what are you doing here? And like threaten them to get off and tell them to go and enjoy their vacation, or if they're sick, not to work. Like that's not the environment we're trying to build. And if there's something super urgent, tell me, we'll find somebody to do it, but you should rest because you're sick. And that's really important, that there are champions internally, and every leader is a champion in that. But we see it happening cross-functionally, so people doing that to their peers. So they know not to message when somebody's off, and we update statuses on that a lot. And they know to, tell people to leave Slack or leave their email if they're doing something they shouldn't on a vacation day or on a sick day. And I think that those cultural markers kind of help a lot to build that trust that we know you're just taking your time off. There's nothing wrong with that. And we don't want to make it seem like you should feel guilty that you're not working when you're on vacation. Like that's, I think, something that's hard to feel sometimes when you're so in love with your work, right?
Right. Yeah, that feeling of guilt is overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's tricky.
Yeah, I think it's a main emotion that I have to combat, because it's really easy to do that. I think I'm doing a lot better, but I think like that was a big one early on.
Well, I mean, again, when you think about something at the very beginning, when you think about the failure rate of 80+%, and all the pressure and anxiety, hiring people, raising money, competitive landscape, all kinds of different challenges. The mental health issues are more pervasive, I think, in startups and with founders than people know.
Yeah.
There was a thinking not that many years ago that it was like 5 or 10%.
Yeah.
I was reading recently and had some significant discussions with folks that say it's somewhere north of 30%. That's a fairly significant amount of anxiety and pressure and mental health issues that are affecting people. Did you have resources that you went to, or did you really just rely on the meditation and the introspection, or are there outside resources available for entrepreneurs and founders? And if not, should there be?
Yeah. I went through my own resource to get therapy, but I do think it's like peer groups are like very positive. So I've created also like my network of other women entrepreneurs that I talk with and stuff like that. But I know there's some really, really great peer groups that I need to make time for, but like the Founder City Project or Peer Scale, like there's a couple different ones that I think would be great for anyone looking for that. I've been lucky that somehow I have my own kind of organic group, but that's really what I was really looking for, is like validity, that like the feelings I was feeling were normal and that someone else was also had also been through, like that ability to relate to someone was really, really important with that during that time. Because you do feel like you feel that guilt, or you say like, am I crazy? Like, am I the only one? Like, why does it look so easy for this other founder? You start comparing yourself. And I think that that's the danger. And that's why I decided to like really come out with my story, because, I'll often meet people and they'll be like, oh my God, Marie, you're all over LinkedIn. Like you're doing so good. You're like crushing it. And it's like, yeah, like that's obviously the persona that we all have to portray, right? Like we're all trying to raise money, we're all trying to get customers, right? So we're not going to say like, oh my God, I lost my customer and I'm freaking out, whatever. We're not going to say those things on social. But when I came out with my story, I thought it was really important, because what interpelled me to or called me to do it was I saw another entrepreneur say that if you're passionate about something, you will never burn out. And he made a post about that. And that just frustrated me to the core, because I think that like this hustler's culture that we've developed of like go, 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 never stop is not helpful to anyone.
No.
It's not helpful to us as founders for sure, but even to our teams. And I think like for my team, I wanted them to also know that, even I, as someone who's very passionate, I have my limits too, right? And I think that hopefully it inspires others to just like be more open about that. And especially like if it can, at least in my organization, say like, we want you to grow. We want you to persevere. We want you to be successful, but not at the expense of your health.
And I can back you up 110%. That whole maverick thing is a very macho thing that, really, it doesn't resonate. I've been in YPO, Young Presidents Organization, for 20 years. We had like 120 CEOs in our chapter. Let me tell you, a lot of them were going through tons of problems, challenges, family issues, anxieties. And then inside my forum, 8 or 9 different CEOs, on an ongoing basis, there's a cycle of good times, bad times, where you need to help each other. You need to actively and empathetically listen to each other. And so I would concur. I think this is across the spectrum of entrepreneurs or CEOs, or people who carry a ton of weight on their shoulders and are really trying to create something special, but they've got dozens or hundreds or thousands of people that are relying on them to succeed. And I was lucky enough to be in a forum of people that we would share openly in a very discreet environment. So we would say things and share things that were really as deep in us as possible. And I share with you, I meditate on a daily basis, and I do a lot of things to get to that place, but not everybody does. So having that sharing, having that openness, even between the two of you, as well as with other friends, I mean, it really is powerful. So I'm glad that you've been able to, share the story, because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of other founders that come out and say, you know what, I'm also experiencing this. And that's one of the things that I want to shine a light on. And one of the reasons I'm excited to be with you today is I want to shine a light on this, and then try and find ways that founders and people who do have that pressure on them, for success, can find ways to manage through it. The other thing I wanted to touch on, which is really impressive to me, is the number of community things that you're involved in, right? Like it's a pretty big deal, like supporting the initiatives around women in tech and retail TO. I mean, you've got a business, you've got personal life, and now you're taking on all this community stuff because you really believe in furthering, well, for instance, women in technology. That's a group of people that, I mean, obviously, because you've been through Next, that we really emphasize. But it's a big deal, and that's a big commitment of yourself, your time, and sometimes money as well. So maybe talk a bit about community and why that's important to you.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, at the end of the day, since the beginning of building our business, I feel like your network is the gift that keeps on giving. So obviously you do it in the case of like women in tech or retail TO, like you start from just a sheer passion of wanting to help the community. But I do think that your network is part of your job, sure. And that it's really important. So why I'm excited about women in tech and retail in Toronto is, first of all, when I started Sampler 6 years ago, I would participate in several different competitions or networking events, and it was very often that I was the only woman in the room. And that has changed significantly over the last several years, and I can now proudly say that I am very solemnly the only woman in the room. And I think that that's because we've inspired all the women that were there 6 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, have all inspired other women to get into tech. And I think that is my responsibility to continue to do that as much as every other woman who's in tech. And the first thing that I want to start with is in hiring women and people from diverse backgrounds in my organization, and then continuing to talk about, all the joys that entrepreneurship can bring to me and to the team, because we will bring more just by inspiring, right?
And so do you feel that both of you have, in your community outreach, your philanthropy, that you have inspired many other women who were on the fence, they weren't sure, to take that leap of faith, believe in themselves, and go and build companies as well? Like, is that an important legacy for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I am the only thing that made them make the leap, but I often hear from other women, I think they are inspired by other people who've walked the path, right? It can be so overwhelming to get into technology, so or to get into business, like into entrepreneurship. I would hate to take credit for it. It takes a lot more than just a person.
No, of course, but yeah. I mean, if you're in a room with 40 other committed entrepreneurs, and they're all facing similar challenges, and you have similarities as females or whatever, there is that inspirational moment, right? Mm-hmm. Where, one person says one thing, another says another, and then a little discussion ensues. And then that individual goes home and says, oh my gosh, you know what? I identify with what I was hearing. That really resonated for me. Maybe I do have this in me. Maybe that idea that I've been putting in the back of my mind, maybe it needs to come to the front of my mind, and maybe I can reach out to them, because I'm sure if somebody reached out to either one of you and said, this thing is driving me crazy, I feel like I've got to take it and commercialize it, you would take the call. Mm-hmm. You would have the discussion. You'd sit down over a coffee and say, here are some of the things that I went through. Here are some of the things you might want to consider. And that starts the ball rolling. That's That's pretty powerful, right? And that's what, groups like Move the Dial are really moving toward empowering and educating and supporting, right? So, and I think that's what you guys are all about.
Yeah, of course, for
For
sure.
sure. And I think, I'm not sure if this was the case for you, Marie, but I suspect it was. Looking back, I was the first amongst my friends to be an entrepreneur, and I knew a couple of acquaintances from university. So you do go do that in your journey to talk to anybody you might know who might be ahead of you on that path. But it's a funny thing because the month after I quit my job to start my first business, I remember how many people who I had very rare conversations with or who I was sort of close to became so close to me in my circle because they started to share with me their ideas, and we would do brainstorming sessions together and figure out, who do I know that could help you? Who do you know that could help me? And, it's this amazing thing that kind of happens, that your community does pull you forward, and it is your responsibility to pull the community forward too, right? It's
well, and it was really powerful when you said earlier that you wanted to be part of Next because it was a like-minded group of people. Everybody there had similar goals and objectives and a vision for their future. How did Next help you become a better person or a more successful business leader?
It's a great question, because I remember at the point I applied to Next Founders, maybe I was better suited for Next 36, but our business was a bit too far ahead for the Next 36 program. So I found myself in a peer group of about 18 people in our cohort, and some of them had been in business for 8 years. Some of them had revenue in 8 million to 10 million range, and our scrappy little startup was under 100K of revenue at that point. We were small. We had been working on things. We were a team of 2. We had learned a lot, but we were definitely earlier in our business's journey than anybody else in that cohort. And I kind of thank my lucky stars, because we progressed through so many hurdles that we would have, probably learned in 3 years, but we learned in 3 months. And it actually forced us to think a lot bigger. And the whole trick to scale is that the process and the nuts and the bolts and the things that are under the hood, the foundation that we were talking about, is how you are enabled to scale. Of course, the market and the customer pulls you there, but you won't be able to sustain it unless you actually set that foundation up. And Next, not just amongst the professors and the teachers who are so experienced and so knowledgeable, but just the peer group who tactically said, do this or don't do this, or this was what my experience was, maybe this will be your experience too. Every day was electrifying. It was so much to learn, so much to absorb, and so many amazing people to meet, like Marie.
See, that's great. And we're actually we've identified that mentorship and having that coaching for those who are ready for it is really, because it's one-on-one. It's very focused and personal. So we're actually going to change some of the dynamics of our programming based on the feedback that you and others have given us, so that we can have more of those supports. And the fact that you were able to figure that out so quickly and then, pivot your life and your career, that's pretty exciting, pretty rewarding for our team to hear.
And I get to work with Marie every day, which is such a treasure, honestly.
So
She's going to make me cry.
Well, you guys, again, when you think about, where you were at, right? Diametrically motivated, if you will, to have perfect alignment. There's so many challenges in business, and having founder difficulties is one of the worst. When you have alignment, when you have a similar vision, mission, objectives, and there is that, okay, we've got this and we're together on this, and you bring everybody along with you, that's when it's really spectacular. So again, pretty big learning. Is there one last thing that you'd like to leave us with? I know you're growing like crazy. You're in the middle of hiring more people, acquiring new customers. I mean, it's an incredible growth story. Are there any messages that you'd like to leave the listeners with?
I think just trust yourself and go for it. If you're thinking about building a business, it's going to be an awesome ride. Take it in big bites, but remember to be kind to yourself, because at the end of the day, you're the biggest asset of the company, and you will probably need to continue to be for the foreseeable future. So like your health should always be, number one for sure.
And that, when the intention is clear, the community will appear. So you will find people to help you at every step of the way. And being a founder is one path, but entrepreneurship is being a founder, being an entrepreneur, doing something at somebody else's startup. There's a lot of paths, and it's a winding one. So, you don't have to start off as a founder if you don't want to. You can take a different path and build something exciting and of significance and get those highs and, in your own right, change the world.
It is pretty special, isn't it? That people, serendipity, coincidence, energy. There's just so many opportunities where you've got a very clear vision, clear goal, great team, raising money, and it just shows up.
Yeah.
Like it magically appears. It's pretty cool. And then you just have to be smart enough to know, which is the right money or the right partner or the right, and that comes with a little bit of experience and again, having that innate ability to know what's the right fit. So instinct, I guess.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't want to take any more of your afternoon. You've got so many important projects and busy careers and lives. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas. I think this has been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thanks so much, Steph and Max. That's been great.
Thanks for tuning into LaunchPod. We're so proud to be part of this community doing such great things to move our country forward, but our reach only goes as far as your support. So please download and subscribe to amplify the voices doing the hard work to advance Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem.